Coming up on episode 79 of the Behind the Back podcast, the Sacramento Kings just came off of a tough loss to Denver, but ultimately finished this road trip 3-1. Ben and I break down what we liked, what we saw, and take a look at the upcoming 3 games ahead of the schedule. Then we pivot on to San Francisco. Deebo Samuel traded to the Washington Commanders, and news of Brandon Aiyuk potentially getting traded. Ben breaks down that news, plus some free agency topics from San Fran over here. Then we pivot on over to Philly, talk about the Eagles re-signing Saquon Barkley and Zack Baun, and obviously some few free agency moves we have a breakdown for Philly. All right, y'all. With that being said, let's get it. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I am Marcos Conan Negron, and beside me here, as always, is Ben the Jet Rets. Ben, I know we just watched the Kings lose against Denver, but how are you doing? You doing okay?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I think the Kings have found a little bit of a rhythm, and I'm just kind of looking forward to talking about them.
Absolutely. So as you guys heard in the intro, we got a lot of fun stuff to talk about today. But now we were picking up off of a 4-game road trip that the Sacramento Kings took. And listen, they went 3-1. We talked about it going into this road trip, what we were wanting to see. And if you want to talk about some, highlights from every game or something, a little summary of what happened before we recap this Denver game.
Yeah, so the road trip kicked off in Utah, and honestly, it was, the Utah was a struggling team that, you wanted to go in and kind of, just not make it a game at any point. And the Kings did a really good job of doing so. They got out to an early-ish jump, by the end of the first half. They kind of took control of that game and didn't really look back from there. And after that, they took their efforts into Houston, where they took on the Rockets for the third time and final time, and they got that W, which, we felt good about Houston all season long. We felt like that's a team that we match up well against. There was kind of some statements being made by Domas in the first 2 games against Şengün there, who probably feels like he should be the more talked about center, right? And so ultimately, Domas didn't play in that game. I think that was the game he got injured. Is that right?
Yeah, I left a minute into the game.
Yeah, so he leaves a minute into the game. Jonas Valanciunas steps up, and he filled in really well. When you're asked to step in and fill in essentially starter minutes in a game you never anticipated of doing so, especially when this is your 10th game with the Kings, like that was massive. And his presence was perfect. I think he meshed really well. And the Kings were able to get the W in Houston. And then moving on to Dallas, they walked on Dallas. And that was a ton of fun. It was nice to be able to actually rest your guys in the fourth quarter against Dallas, knowing that you have to go to the Mile High State the next game and put your best foot forward, right? So the road trip was really successful through those 3 games, and you felt good going into this Nuggets game. Obviously, Malik Monk in the last game, I think I saw the play where it happened, but something with his toe.
Mm-hmm.
Some toe injury that hopefully isn't long-term. I haven't heard that it's going to be long-term. It just sounds like it's a 1 or maybe 2 games, but if it's 2 games, this is going to be kind of hairy. But, his presence was definitely missed, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But ultimately, those first 3 games was just, we talked about it last week. It was the perfect ramp up, right? You get the easy game, and then the, not so easy, but still you feel good. And then, you kind of get an easy game in Dallas, but you probably expected a little more of a fight. Obviously, prayers to Kyrie Irving, that ACL tear was awful. I feel awful. He's an absolute dog for shooting those free throws. I thought that was a really inspiring moment that I kind of want to shout him out for. But prayers up to him. Hope for a speedy recovery, and pray for your Mavs fans out there, because Mavs fans are hurting right now. It's not fun over there. But ultimately, the road trip ramped up, and you finish it off here in Denver, Marcos. So let's talk about this Denver game, because the first 2 quarters were awesome. the Kings were playing their brand of basketball, not the Nuggets brand of basketball. The Kings came into Denver and set the tone early in this game. And the Nuggets didn't get more than a 1 point lead until I think it was the fourth quarter when they started separating. So, what stood out to you in this Denver game more than anything?
I think the main thing for me that I noticed is that even when our offense kind of tanks, our defense hangs on. So that was kind of like the physical identity that we kind of had when we were streaking a little bit last year, relying on our effort, relying on our hustle, like always finish the plays, never give up. Keegan had a few awesome contests in this game. Keon was playing really well. Obviously, there was a lot of fouls in this game, and we'll talk about that kind of mixed in here. But they were playing physical. They were just getting in Jokic's grill. He was complaining every single time down the floor. So we were dictating the pace, and that was kind of the case for the whole road trip. I think they kind of figured out how to power through the tough times together. And now in that situation, they were weathering storm after storm against Denver and really just kind of they were setting the tone for the majority. They outplayed Denver for 3 out of the 4 quarters, but then we ran into the one fatal issue, and that was a super super rough fourth quarter. So was there anything about that fourth quarter that like really stood out to you?
Yeah, the biggest thing, and off the air, I'm texting you back and forth. I'm, crashing out over here on my couch, right? And I'm texting you, I'm like, man, these refs just suck. They are terrible. They're, blah, 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 refs, refs, refs. And I started thinking about it. And Marcos, I haven't dove into it quite yet, but we didn't touch the paint that much in this game. At least it felt like a majority of our shots were mid-range and three-pointers. And to me, that stands out when you're trying to get calls down the stretch. It stands out because you haven't necessarily earned the respect on the inside in the paint like that all game long from not just your opponent, but actually from the refs. They haven't been seeing you take it to the rim all game long and seeing what's happening when you get there. And so you get these situations where DeMar gets, what should be an easy bunny, he gets hacked, and there's no call, even though it's right in front of the official. But it's because all game long you've been, settling for these jump shots. And so, it's one thing when you look at it that way, but I do have to say, like, it completely took our momentum away
Mm-hmm.
when we weren't getting the calls that we expected to get. And then just some boneheaded defensive, mistakes. And I don't even mean like, easy buckets, but just some. Keon had a couple where he just put his hand in the breadbasket a little too long and got called for a ticky tack. There was Jake LaRavia, a couple on Jokic. Like there was just some calls tonight that weren't going your way, and you continue to kind of put yourself in that position. So they didn't do themselves justice. But down the stretch, this Kings team really showed me that, whatever five is out there, they're going to find ways to get buckets. And that part of it, I'm not worried about. And I know a lot of Kings fans aren't worried about that too. But what really stood out to me was the team defense through the first 3 quarters of this game. And that to me is something that you build on. I love the offense that we're seeing from this team right now. But where this team has needed to grow for the last 2 years, and specifically this year, was on the defensive end of the floor. And that's something that I'm seeing. Doug has really got this new unit of guys just bought into whatever defensive scheme he's throwing at them. And, tonight early on, he was calling on Keegan Murray to defend Jokic. He did what he could on him. And look, Jokic is just a unicorn. The last time we ended up playing Denver, he had an insane stat line. I can't even remember off the top of my head, but it was like a 30, 20, and 15 game or something crazy like that. And this time around, Jokic was struggling in this game. He ended with 22 points, 15 rebounds, and 6 assists, which is a struggling game from a Nikola Jokic, right? So you threw everything you could at the best player on that team, and you forced the players around him to beat you. I can live with this loss, especially because you also gave yourself the cushion in the first 3 games of your road trip to accept the loss here.
Yeah, and that was one of the main things we talked about going into this road trip. We're like, if we can just take care of business against some of these other teams, we know we're going to drop one of these games. Hopefully, it ended up being the Denver game because that was going to be the toughest one. And listen, we took Denver to the end. Like, we were up 9 going into the third, and we were just consistently fighting off, any push that they made. And, at the end of the day, they got calls at the end. They were hitting those shots, and we got stale. I think this was one of those things where we looked really good, but then for some reason it just felt like the fourth quarter specifically we missed Malik Monk. The other 3 quarters it felt totally fine. Everything was groovy. Offense was all systems go. The defense, they were doing all those good things, but DeMar took 32 shots in this game. He had 35 points. He played 42 minutes, but like, yeah, he had 35 points, but it took 32 shots. He was kind of forcing it a little bit. He had stretches in this game where he was hitting 2 or 3 or 4 shots in a row, and that's, we relied on that a little too much, I think, at times. And that's where I felt like, LaVine tried to step up a little bit at the end there too, and he made a couple tough ones. Before it was all said and done. But I also think like he's the kind of player, like, yes, DeMar had the hot hand, but I do think there was times where DeMar was like trying to defer to Keon, like, hey, run the play over here real quick and give me a second. Like he was gassed, and that's tough playing in Denver. That's their true home court advantage. But um this game showed me we can hang, and I think that this team is, again, they needed to play a game above their weight. This is their first game against a legitimately tough team. Like, Houston's a good team, but against a championship level team since the All-Star break. So, and we're about to get plenty more of those kind of games coming up. But I thought we hung out pretty well with Denver, and I think that this is a game we can build off of. I'm not mad. I mean, when Russell Westbrook gets 25 points and he actually hits threes, that's, there's only so much you can do there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, kind of to build off that Malik Monk in the fourth quarter thing, one thing I noticed kind of all game long was there was a lot of ISO play, right? And you saw it from DeMar. That's why he takes 32 shots. That wasn't 32 shots off of an assist. You know what I mean? That was 32 shots off of probably 24 of them backing somebody down in the post, right? And so I'm not even necessarily looking at this yet, but what I can tell you in this game, the Kings recorded 22 assists on 44 made buckets. Now, I'm going to go back to the previous game against the Mavericks, and the Kings recorded 34 assists on 47 made baskets. So you see the difference there in having that, that playmaking that Malik Monk is capable of doing, and that, versatility of having Malik in the pick and roll game and et cetera, et cetera. Like, when Malik is out there, you see that energy and that ball kick around, and you see less of the ISO. And I know that Malik has fallen into the ISO, bug before. Every player does to an extent, right? But this game in particular, when you needed to see some 2-man game, and I know Valanciunas was huffing and puffing. He had a lot of assignments tonight, and you could tell that elevation was getting to him. But when you needed a bucket and you needed to go to a 2-man game, it wasn't necessarily there, or at least wasn't as clean as it could be. So I think that was a large reason why, we saw a lot of that ISO play, was because you didn't have your 1-2 punch with Malik Monk out there.
Right. And same with Domas. Honestly, I do think like this extra time that Jonas is getting is going to benefit him, at least from a, fitness standpoint. Like, you're getting the extra minutes now, and then when Domas comes back, you're going to be much fresher when it's time for him. But I felt like, again, this is where the trade was, is kind of showing its benefit a little bit. The depth that we had in this game, Laravia was making big plays. LaVine has been awesome. He got Player of the Week during this stretch too, the first time of his career. So these guys are figuring out. I'm watching LaVine communicate on every possession, whether it's offense and even on the defense too. On offense, early on, he directed Jonas. He's like, "Hey, you have backside wide open, like, just take him." And Jonas burned Jokic on that play. So I was like, I really like that LaVine is finally starting to step up and be a leader. And when we're missing guys like Domas and Malik, who are the guys who are homegrown, like, these guys have been here for the past 2 years leading this team. Now, LaVine and DeMar kind of have to take that load on for this team. So I think, in a pinch, they've done a really good job. And I think that we're and everyone's been playing hurt. Like we've been playing hurt teams, and Denver was hurt. They were missing Aaron Gordon in this
Mm-hmm.
one too. So it's not like they were at full strength. But you know, when we get Domas and Malik back, I feel really good about the depth and the versatility that we have, and we can throw out any lineup at any time. So hopefully, when Domas does come back and his hamstring injury, it doesn't linger. That is the one thing I'm worried about long term. But I think from this Denver game, I was really happy with the effort they gave. And there was, at the end of the day, this is a learning experience. They could have finished that fourth a lot stronger, but they had really good moments in this game where they can really move forward with that.
Yeah, and I gotta take a second here and give flowers where they're due. We've come on this podcast a number of times this year, and I in particular have bashed on the front office and X, Y, and Z with the organization of the Sacramento Kings. But I do have to hand the flowers to Monty and the front office for acquiring Jonas Valanciunas at the trade deadline, and on top of the additions you just talked about with Jake LaRavia, right? The additions they made at the trade deadline, it was similar to that of like the Mavericks of last year, right? When they got those pieces at the trade deadline with Gafford, and I think they got PJ Washington. Is that right?
I think it was I think it was Derek Jones, wasn't it? No, or maybe he signed there. I
I don't
forget.
remember.
It was one of those wing guys. You're right, though.
Yeah, so it was a wing and it was Gafford, and those were the two pieces they needed, right? Similar to the Kings.
It was
And
Washington. You're right.
it was okay. So they got those two guys, and then they make a Western Conference Finals run, and it was obviously the Kings most likely won't make that run, right? But what they are going to do is they show that depth every single game now. You have a bench that you can rely on. You have different lineups that you can go to. Like that was, we saw a lineup tonight at one point. I don't quite remember off the top of my head what it was, but we saw a lineup tonight that we really haven't seen before. And it featured like a Doug McBucket in it at one point.
Yeah.
And Katie Christensen made a comment about it being one of the first times, if not the first time, we've seen that lineup. And I thought it was interesting because it just shows how versatile this team can be now, and how they can throw different looks at you. And obviously that is representative of the injuries that the Kings are going through right now. But just the sheer fact that you're able to have that that flexibility is huge. And shout out to the front office for Jonas Valanciunas. I think that trade in particular saved the Sacramento Kings season.
Yeah, that they made something out of what almost felt like nothing during this trade deadline, because we didn't think LaVine was going to end up being what he was when he was the main guy we got back from Fox, right? Like we thought in a vacuum, those two were like, okay, what did we didn't get better. And then we got Valanciunas. We're like, oh, okay, there's a vision now. There's a path here. And then you get LaRavia, and we're like, all of a sudden, Trey Lyles is our 10th man, and he's lost in the rotation somehow. So I'm like, okay, this is showing me something that now all of a sudden we kind of have a pool of guys to go to who are ready to go and who have shown that they can can contribute in a pinch. And that's a good spot to be in, especially if things don't work out well this year. This is still something that you can build off of. So I'm completely okay with them taking that swing, because at the end of the day, we're still in a decent spot. And I honestly I don't know how many of these games would have resulted the same way, even if we did have Fox here. So this does feel like we're receiving a little bit of that return, and we're watching guys like Arabia had a great game. He had 15 points today. His 3-point shot finally fell. He was trying to be a pest defensively, and honestly, he got a lot of foul calls, but he has been a valuable piece. And to be able to outplay Trey in minutes, just shows the trust that he's already developed within the coaching staff. So this is it's an interesting ride. So can these guys develop into something potentially over these next 20 games? Yeah, I see it now. I think this is something that we, Kings fans were waiting for. And now this past week and a half, 2 weeks, we're really starting to see the vision here.
Yeah, and if that vision continues to, kind of progress the way we want it to and want to expect it to, there's hope for the offseason as well. And that's something that we wanted to get to that point again, because fresh off the trade deadline, we were like, man, this team has zero hope. Like, this doesn't look good. Our future looks, dim. And obviously the money is going to be an issue. And we're going to get into contract negotiations and contract conversations at the end of the season, right? But as it sits, this is a team. There is a legit team here. Yes, they still lack defensive talent. However, they do have the size again, and they have the depth, and that's two of the three things that we've been calling for essentially a year and a half. So it's all good right now. Right now, everything is good. So Marcos, we come back home to Sacramento against De'Aaron Fox and the San Antonio Spurs.
So I want your quick opinion before we enter the Foxy topic of it all. Obviously, for those who haven't been paying attention, Victor Wembanyama is out for the season. They shut him down. He had the season-ending injury in his shoulder, something a little worrisome, but they're monitoring him. And obviously, Fox has been dealing with his finger since before the season even started. Why do you think they should shut him down? And do you think, I don't think there's a possibility they would Friday, but do you think at any point this season they're going to shut him down?
It would be the right move, but at the same time, I'm out here advocating for not shutting players down. Mm-hmm. Because, when I spend money to go see teams play, I expect to see, certain players. When I'm buying tickets to go see like a San Antonio Spurs, I would like to see Victor Wembanyama and De'Aaron Fox. And obviously Victor is a completely separate situation than this, right? But the Fox situation, I would be upset, if my favorite players weren't there. But from an organization standpoint and a team building standpoint, San Antonio's essentially got two top 10 picks. They've got Atlanta's pick this year, and if the Spurs continue losing games, they could fall into that lottery conversation as well. So from that standpoint, if I was on that side of things and was called to make that decision, I would probably say to shut De'Aaron Fox down and, do a light tank to give yourself a better chance at the draft. Because there's two things there. You get Fox on an earlier timetable to come back in the offseason to get to work. You get, that first round potential, lottery pick, right? You get a higher chance at a lottery pick at that point. Mm-hmm. You're not gunning for anything as the Spurs right now. The Spurs, they are outside of the 10th seed by 4.5 games. They're not gunning for anything. You're not going to catch any of those teams, especially with Victor sitting, defensive player of the year sitting. It's just not going to happen. So I would sit Fox, but from a fan standpoint, I would hate it because it would piss me off if I couldn't go see this team because that player was shut down by his team.
Right. That makes total sense. Okay, so let's get into the nitty gritty. We're still going to talk Fox because that really is the story of, this game because he's coming home. So it's going to be interesting to see him in a, San Antonio uniform. First time in a long time that we've had a player of his caliber in this situation since Boogie in New Orleans when we saw that for the first time.
I went to that game. I went to that Boogie return game. I was sitting almost courtside. It was the closest I ever sat. I was like triple B. Yeah, I wrote triple B with my dad. It was such a legendary game. It was so much fun.
Yeah, see, so it's gonna be interesting to see. Obviously De'Aaron Fox didn't leave with, the reports that came out after the fact and everything. It wasn't the prettiest exit. So, you can do a you personal and I'll do my own personal on how we would feel. But how do you think Sacramento is going to be? Do you think he's going to get booed in the arena? Do you think he's going to receive a warm reception? I know I'm guarantee the Kings are going to set up like a video board thing for him. They're going to do his highlights and thank Fox. He's, statistically a top 5 all-time Sacramento King. So what do you think what would you boo him or do you think the fans are going to boo him too?
I think you're going to hear a mixture. I think you're going to hear some boos and you're going to hear some cheers. I personally will partake in the cheers because I have a lot of respect for De'Aaron Fox. I think that De'Aaron Fox stuck around in Sacramento longer than he needed to and I won't say longer than he should have, but he didn't need to stick around as long as he did. and he stuck around with a generally good attitude. He took a lot of shots, not basketball shots, but shots, from fan bases and media throughout this season, and especially in that time period after they fired Mike Brown, when our organization wouldn't come out and hit the podium and instead put our franchise player up there to answer questions. And I think he did a damn good job of it. So I have nothing but respect for De'Aaron Fox. Some of the stuff that I've heard, after the fact with the trade, it's a little annoying. It's a little upsetting. I get it from that standpoint. But I can't sit here and negate the 7-8 seasons that he was here in Sacramento and how committed he was to this team and this organization. So I will be cheering.
Same. I, love Foxy to death. It's hard to see a player like that go. And obviously, I'm ultimately praying on his downfall now that he's gone. But, we can do that as a fan base. But that doesn't mean, like, for that moment, he deserves our respect and, for putting his body on the line and giving us his all and being the reason this new era of Kings basketball was really able to get kind of off the ground and running. It was because of him.
Yeah.
So, without Foxy, none of these guys are here today, kind of in that sense. So, a lot of respect. I hope that fans give him, the cheers. But I do expect mixed feelings. Sacramento fans are weird. We're an emotional bunch. We'll do it just to be passive aggressive for no reason. So,
yeah.
I don't know how many of those boos when they are booing are going to be like legitimate, like, boos, are more just like, haha, type of thing. So I think it's going to be great though. Like it's a game that, I'm excited to see.
Yeah. And look, I would be nervous to boo De'Aaron Fox and get in his head before a game even tips off. Because if we know De'Aaron Fox, we know that he plays a lot better when he's upset. And that's something that I'm not trying to make De'Aaron Fox in this game.
I wonder if his wife traveled down and if they're gonna sit in the same courtside spots if they give him that. I'd wonder if they do something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. My understanding is that Rasay and De'Aaron Fox had to pay full price for those tickets all year long, and every year that Rasay was sitting in those seats, and so I wouldn't be surprised if she doesn't make the trip. But at the same time, she is super supportive of Fox, and those two they're a great couple. Mm-hmm. So I at the same time wouldn't be surprised to see her sitting down there.
Yeah, so let's talk about the game itself. Obviously, we are aware that, depending on how Foxy decides to take this reception, the right kind of plays, a couple steals here and there, some chirping here and there. I feel like Malik will be here. He was questionable. I think he didn't play in this game because he really wants to play against Foxy. So I do think they're going to be chirping back and forth. So it's going to be an interesting game, and I do wonder if we get some Zach LaVine versus De'Aaron Fox moments too. So that'll be some interesting things to look out for. But they got a good young team. They got a lot of talented guards, but obviously their big man situation's a little light. So this is another game where potentially Jonas can continue to hold down the fort and assert his presence down there.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about it off the air. We were texting about the Dallas game, and we were talking about the Dallas Mavericks and their lack of centers right now. Gafford injured, Lively injured, obviously Anthony Davis down for the count, right? So we were talking about that, and I was like, it would be a form of like malpractice, and it would be on coaching if we don't run a majority of our plays down low in the post to Jonas. And it's, we saw a lot of it in that Dallas game. They did exactly that. And in this game, I expect similar. I want to see us get to the paint. I want to see us, kind of, beat some bodies, get into the chest and go down low and really establish your presence early. The storyline in this one, obviously with De'Aaron Fox being here, but for me and the Kings is I want to see Malik get back, because you can tell Malik, this whole thing meant something to him. When De'Aaron Fox was departed out, they asked him questions about it, and he answered them, but he answered them with kind of like, the ultimate frown on his face, and he just didn't want to address the subject. And they asked him at one point, have you talked to De'Aaron Fox during or after everything? And And he said, no, I didn't text him during it, and I haven't texted him after. We'll reach out at some point. And so you can tell, like, obviously with him taking the amazing pay cut he did, out of his pocket to stay in Sacramento with his best friend and to build this thing here in Sacramento prior to De'Aaron jumping ship, you can tell that bugs him. And so what I'm looking for in this one is I'm looking for a big Malik game. And I think you're onto something. I really do. I think that, he probably sat this game knowing that, this is a thing, whatever's going on with his toe. He wants to make sure it's 100% because he's going to get his revenge and his get back in this game in San Antonio. And I expect him to do some crazy play or to go off and get right up in the chest of De'Aaron Fox and let him know.
It's going to be very interesting, too, because I expect Keegan to be guarding Foxy right out of the gate. And then if we see just Foxy and Keegan and Keon, it's going to be fun. We kind of noticed that a little bit with, when we played the Raptors early in the season and it was him and Davion, the one player who had played against him consistently every day in practice. I think there's going to be something that, it's not like Foxy's going to pick up that many new tricks down there in San Antonio that, these guys haven't already seen. So it's going to be a battle if Foxy wants to take this team on kind of by himself type of thing.
Yeah. If I was coach, I would tell Keegan, like, you were the one who had that entire offseason workout with De'Aaron Fox, where you guys essentially played one-on-one all offseason long. And we saw the jump in Keegan's defensive numbers after doing that. We saw that year 2 jump. Defensively, he was a monster. We were like, wow, we have a two-way wing. And I expect Keegan, like, if I was coach, I would say, Keegan Murray, you took an entire offseason and played one-on-one on De'Aaron Fox. I want you guarding him this entire game. Don't switch a thing.
Yeah, exactly. So no, like, it'll be interesting to see. There's a lot of like narratives, like approaches within the game that they can take for this one. So, obviously this is going to be an emotional game, and it's every game now for both of these teams. The Spurs are, so long as Fox is playing, he's playing to try and get into the playoffs. And this is just as an important game for them as it is for us. And they're gonna give it everything they have, and they got a lot of wings that can get hot. Champagne is a random one that always gets hot against us. Savon Castle has a chance for breakout moments, and he's gonna be creating havoc on defense. They got good young pieces, so this is gonna be.
Chris Paul also likes to randomly play well against us. It's annoying.
Yeah. And we got Harrison Barnes coming back home as well, so this will be another good game for him too. So it's funny. It's gonna be funny seeing Barnes and Foxy at the same time again. So. We'll see. We'll see how that one goes. But I feel good about that game. Obviously, that's the game you're going to want to get in this particular, stretch of 3 that we're paying attention to, because the next time we record, it will most likely be before that Thursday game that we have against the Warriors. But over the weekend, we have a back-to-back with the Clippers and the Knicks. So that's a tough one. And listen, for the Knicks specifically, there was news today that came out that Karl Anthony Towns is spending time away from the team. Personal reasons, I guess, is what they're saying.
Prayers on that real quick. I'm going to interrupt you because I'm going to mess it up. Either his partner, his wife, girlfriend, I'm not sure who it is.
I think they're dating.
Yeah, she tweeted today, F cancer. So there's something going on there. Prayers out to them. That's the personal reason why Karl is going to miss.
So he's most likely going to miss this game against the Kings. So that'll be something to look out for. And that's another advantageous spot for a guy like Jonas. And this game against the Clippers is huge because, if there's one guy that Domas usually struggles against, it's Zubac. And if there's one other guy on this team now that we have that can kind of match up with any of the other most physical guys in the league, it's Jonas. And I think it's on both sides of the ball. Like we saw it tonight against, Jokic. He hated playing against, Jonas and having to bump uglies with him the whole time. Like, we were pissing him off. And I think that Jonas's physicality is going to be very much needed against these, this other guys, Zubac especially. If we want to limit what they do down low, because we're already going to have to try and pressure Harden and Kawhi. And I'm not going to be surprised if we just try to blitz Harden all day to get the ball out of his hands. So,
yeah, and keep in mind, Dwight Powell was the guy who really had his game against us early on in the season. So
Norman Powell. Sorry, just want to mention.
Norman Powell,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, he had a hell of a game in Sacramento. To kind of early stages of the season. I think it was in November.
Yeah, he loves
So
us.
yeah, you got to kind of pick your poison in this case, and it's a tough game. But I do think that this team offensively can keep up with anybody. When this Kings team is clicking, when things are working the way they should, they can keep up with any team, any offense in the league. Where they will win games is when they lock in down the stretch. And obviously we didn't see that in Denver for X, Y, or Z factor. But, in the games, where you're on your home court, you really got to lock in and take care of business. And obviously this game against Clippers is going to be in LA. That's going to be a harder ask to lock in that case. However, you got to find some form of momentum in the early stages of the game and kind of ride that. And that's where I'm kind of looking at as a key in this game is just early momentum. Similar to what happened tonight, you got to ride that early momentum as long as you can, because yes, the Clippers do still have killers. They have Kawhi, they have Harden, they have guys around that team that are a bucket, and they can get stops as well. So finding that momentum and riding it down the stretch is going to be key.
And again, we're going to be going in shorthanded. Domas being out does create issues. It's easy to say Jonas is that plug and play because he is plug and play, but that does again test our center depth. He's our true backup center. I do think that again, you mentioned him saving the season, because had we not gotten Jonas and we were in this exact position, and then Domas goes out, and we were stuck with no offense to him or anything, but if we were just relying on Alex Len like we were previously, I doubt we're winning this. We're in this winning streak. You know what I mean? So I do think that, we're going to be missing Domas like crazy, but I do think that if we have Malik in this game, we're going to have enough of like you said, an offensive presence against this Clippers team to stress them out enough. It'll just be a matter of, for the Clippers, they're kind of the team that we beat them if they're just a little bit off. And because the problem is this team likes to get hot against us. James Harden's have great games against us, like you said, Powell, and they're going to have Kawhi. He's been playing now, so they're going to be and they have Bogey now running their bench too, so it'll be nice to see Bogey again. But the Clippers are going to be a tough matchup, and we're going to be battling with them for play-in position or top 6 seeding. There, this whole stretch of games that we're going to be playing moving forward, I think there's only 6 or 7 games where it doesn't have direct playoff implications. So it's going to be a stressful game. We need these games now because it's going to be crazy here in a few weeks.
Yeah, and you want to try and obviously do what you did to the Mavericks in their building, right? And try and win this game early on, because you take this back-to-back from LA back home against the New York Knicks. And let's talk about that game here for a minute before we wrap up the Kings talk. This Knicks team, you can't really mess around with them. They're an odd team because they're up and down pretty consistently, but their ups are pretty up and their downs are pretty down.
They can't be good teams.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of season for them, and they're a really weird team. I don't really understand the whole move that they made in the offseason. I think they got worse, but it's a whole different conversation. When we played the Knicks earlier on this season, they essentially, big brothered us in a lot of ways. But that was an entirely different looking Kings team. And so to compare any of, this Clippers game or this New York game to that of prior to the trade deadline, you can't do it, because this is a totally different team. So the same keys that I take from this Clippers game, I'm moving them into the New York game, but I'm telling you also to take care of home court, because home court at this point in the season, especially with the momentum that you've gained in your fan base from this road trip, this building is going to be popping regardless of the outcome in LA. the building's going to be popping because you're in contention for the play-in or the playoffs, depending on how well you do. So everybody knows that. The arena is going to be loud. We're going to be coming off of a game against San Antonio, in our house prior to. So there's reasons why that building should be loud. And there's reasons why the Kings should feed off of that energy. And when the team is feeding off of it, this team doesn't feel like they can be stopped offensively.
Yeah, and the Knicks, so like you said, we can't really compare the game from, last time they played. But one thing we already know about the Knicks is obviously they're going to have Jalen Brunson, and he's going to be the focal point. And especially if Towns is going to be missing in this game, they're definitely going to focus on the perimeter guys, Mikal Bridges, and Josh Hart's going to try and muck everything up. So this obviously this is a playoff team. This is a team that's had our number recently. We play them tough, but Jalen Brunson always seems to find a way to, whether it's being a merchant from the free throw line or just being able to generate points. He is going to be a guy that if we can't slow him down early, we're going to be in trouble. And especially off of a back-to-back, we're going to need to. That's the type of team we can't blink against, and the Knicks will come out punching, and they're going to be physical, and they don't care what they're going to out physical you, and they don't care about what calls they get because they know so long as they're the most aggressive team, they're going to get the calls, and that's usually how they operate with Tom Thibodeau. So they're going to be a tough out, and the Clippers game is going to dictate a lot of the energy that we come out with. I hope, like you said, that the fans really do carry them, and that they buy in. This the rest of the season is going to teach us so much about this team, but they're showing a lot of good things, and it's just I feel so weird. So let me ask you this, because this is a tough 3-game stretch that we have here, but do you think the whole topic of conversation around the league in the West is who's going to get that 6th seed? We're very, very close to think a game and a half back from
I think we're
the
2 now.
yeah
now
2
with
now,
the loss.
and the Warriors are 6, correct?
Oh, we're still a game and a half, and
Okay.
the Warriors are 6th.
So, is there a chance that the Kings, in your head, do you think that we can finish in 6 or above? And I doubt it'll be above. It's really going to be 6 through 8 and avoid that 9 through 10 slot. Do you think that we have a better chance of sliding in 7 to 8? Or do you think we might actually slip and fall to 9?
So I think we do have the better chance slipping in at 7 or 8. And I think that's, if this team continues to play the way they have recently, I think 7 or 8 makes sense. And I would say that this team can take on any of the 3 through 6 teams and be fine. But obviously you won't be playing them.
Right.
But that 6th seed is going to be tough because the addition of Jimmy Butler in Golden State is working better than I anticipated. I thought it would work, but I didn't think it would work as quick. I thought it might take, a minute or so to kind of, get some rhythm and find something there. But really, since Jimmy got to Golden State, they've hit the ground running. It's been everyone's working around Jimmy, and Jimmy's working around everybody. So this Golden State team is finding a stride. They're finding ways to win. Curry's playing some of the best ball of the season right now, and it doesn't look like they're going to slow down. But the Kings, if they string together some massive wins here, with the 3rd toughest remaining schedule now, if they string together some tough wins and the Warriors find a way to lose some key games, we're going to be having a different conversation. And the Kings do play the Warriors one more time here in a couple weeks.
Right. And if we win that game, then we win the series, thus giving us a tiebreaker, which would be huge. So that's the part that, I wonder, that's why there's a feasible chance. Now, is it likely given the way that some of these other teams are playing, like you mentioned? It isn't. And honestly, if we're being real, this Clippers game is going to teach us a bit because they're probably the first matchup that we play in the play-in of these teams. So just some things to look out for. But I do think that I said this a couple times off air, but if I always felt like if the Kings, this version of the Kings, the way they're playing now, if they got 2 chances to get into the playoffs, I think that they would be able to win at least one of those 2 games, whether that's from if they're in the 7th or 8th seed, if they get 2 tries is what I should say. If they're forced to win 2 games, that I don't think they're going to be able to do like they were last year. So this is where I feel confident about it, but in the same vein, if we get the 7th or 8th seed, then we're destined for a matchup with most likely OKC or the Lakers. And, neither one of those teams, especially we haven't faced the new look Lakers either. So this is going to be
Yeah.
it would be, would it be a very quick first round exit? Maybe we win a game or two, but would that be disappointing to you? Would just getting into the playoffs and getting a top 8, getting out of the play-in, would that be viewed as, a bump? Would that meet your expectations given everything that's happened? Because context has changed since the beginning of the season.
That's the key is with the amount of change that this team has gone through, and with everything that's happened this season, to make it into the playoffs, rattle off a couple wins or one win, or maybe you don't get any wins, but if let's say, for instance, they win 2 games against the Lakers or OKC, I would view it as a win, because you have a completely new identity as a team, post essentially, December on, right? From January on, you were a completely new team, and you found a way to weather all those storms to find yourself in a playoff series. And this team hasn't found themselves in a playoff series but one time in the last, 19 years. So I would view it as a win. I would be happy with it, but it's going to make me want that second round more than I have ever wanted that second round.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. And I feel the same way. I do think that, if we get there, it would just show that, okay, this team does have the potential to compete, especially if they're able to rattle off a win or two. That would be great. And that would, meet all of our expectations given everything that's happened. And, and then that leaves the question of, again, if we're in that spot, does Doug Christie keep his job? And, all that, what kind of changes come from that? Do we get another player? All that stuff. So,
dude, Doug
Mhm.
has been incredible.
Yes, he has.
He really has. I didn't necessarily buy into it initially, but holy cow, he has really gotten this team to buy in ever since he took over, and just mad shout out to Doug.
Yeah, he seems like, I think when you watch him, especially these past like 6 or 7 games or so, it almost feels like he really is pulling the strings for this team. Like you can tell that he is dictating the pace with his coaching. He's his constant communications. They're coming out with a consistent game plan. They came out with
Yeah.
a game plan like you were texting me earlier today, like, oh, these teams are backing off Westbrook. Are we going to do the same thing? And the Kings clearly had a plan, and it looks like Doug is doing a good job of preaching this message, because we were executing really well. It just didn't go our way down the stretch today, but I do think that our execution has been awesome, and that's a sign that these guys are buying in and figuring things out under Doug. So yeah, if he keeps winning like this, it's going to be hard to like not want him back with this group. So it'll be interesting for sure.
So let's wrap it up with this final question. I'm going to ask it to you, and then I'm going to answer my own question as well.
Okay.
These 3 games, okay, we're talking San Antonio on Friday, the Clippers on Sunday, and the Knicks on Monday. What is a successful 3-game slate for us?
We need to go 2 out of 3, and I'd preferably, you don't want to lose any of them, and especially not on your home floor. But I definitely want these first 2. We need the San Antonio win. We need to beat them. This is the team that we have to beat, that we should beat, even with Fox on the other side. And the Clippers are a team that we need to beat with this new roster to kind of say, hey, if we're going to go in a play-in matchup with you, we're not afraid. So that's definitely something I want to see.
Yeah, and I agree with that too. I think you need any of the 2 out of 3, but I think I lean a little more towards taking care of that home court advantage. And especially as you ramp things up and you're talking about play-ins and having the home court advantage for that, you're talking about playoffs and what it means to have home court advantage. Obviously, you're not going to have it, but you still have to take care of your home court. So at this point in the season, you need to be able to show that you can take care of your home court, and that's something I'm going to be looking for.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. So this is good. Hopefully they are able to come out of this, 3-0, and we're talking about a really good week. We're adding wins to the win counter. It's, we're maybe not going to hit the 50 wins like we were planning, but this is definitely we're building towards the plan, and our expectations have changed. And I'm really excited to see if these guys, this is good now. Now it's a tough loss, a loss that, from a game that they could have won and should have won. Their response to this is going to be really huge. So, they get to do this, for the first legitimate time off of a winning streak. So I am excited to see that too.
Yes, sir.
All right, so we are going to pivot on here to talk about some football. We got some juicy topics, and we're going to start with the Niners, so we will be right back. All right, we are back to talk some San Francisco 49ers. So, Ben, we got some big news coming out of the San Francisco 49ers camp, and I know we talked a little bit about it last week, about the possibility of it, but it looks like it happened. Ben, take it away.
Yeah, Deebo Samuel is no longer a 49er. He was traded to the Washington Commanders for a 5th-round pick. I'm actually going to ask you, how do you feel about him being on the Commanders, since that's, directly affecting your division?
We literally asked this question as a hypothetical on last week's pod, and I was like, wow, I wasn't that afraid, and I'm still not. I do think, we did talk about it. Deebo, he'll have a little bit of juice to him, but is he the Deebo who's going to put up, 190 yards and 3 touchdowns on us again? No,
2021 Deebo, no.
He's gone. So I do, this is good for Washington. It's a super, for a 5th-round pick, that's kind of a decent, obviously Niners fans are like, Deebo's a little bit more, than that, but a 5th-round pick is better than losing him for nothing. Obviously the cap was the other conversation piece for this Deebo part of it all, but I think they wanted to do right by Deebo, and I think they put him in a good situation where he can still go out and compete for a winning team, even though if Cooper DeJean's going to tackle him, 80 times next year. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, and the biggest thing here was getting any form of a return for Deebo. The rumor was that John Lynch was trying to get a 4th-round pick. Obviously, that would have been better than a 5th-round pick, right? But teams knew that he was destined for getting released anyway. And so at that point, to get any return whatsoever, I think was viewed as a win, especially since you end up shedding some of that cap. And there's some dead space, dead cap space stuff that I'm really bad at. I need to look into that a little bit more to know exactly what we have to work with. But the Niners are working on the cap situation. However, Marcos, it's a little messy, and I'll start it off by giving a quote per Adam Schefter on the Pat McAfee show.
Oh gosh.
He said, with the financial situation that the Niners are in, they're open to listening on just about anybody. If there's a team out there that is willing to take on the Brandon Aiyuk contract, I'm sure they would listen as well. So we had this conversation all off season last year, right? And here we are, off season 2025, and we're talking about it yet again, Marcos. We're here.
Yikes.
So I have kind of 2 mindsets towards it, and I want to discuss it a little bit with you. Initially I'm thinking about his contract, and it's huge. And you're like, this is a guy who just tore his ACL, MCL. Like, he's going to be coming off of one of the biggest injuries that a football player can sustain. What is he going to look like? And obviously, I talked about it last week. His rehab has gone very well so far. He's got a milestone that they're aiming for in the next couple weeks here that'll let us know a little bit more about his timetable. But right now, with no timetable and no indication of necessarily how he's going to look post-injury, there's a lot of questions in the air. And this is a guy you just paid a ton of money to. So from that standpoint, if you could shed this much money and, get some youth at the wide receiver positions, some reliable youth, maybe just one reliable youngster, and then get a vet in like Devontae Adams, or go get somebody like that, somebody who can mentor but also handle the ropes, handle that one, wide receiver one, that position. I think I would view it as a win. So, there's different sides to this, but ultimately, I do think it's a little messed up to move on from a guy like Brandon Aiyuk after you just, gave him this contract the season before. And I know there's some negative energy and stuff going on with Brandon Aiyuk, or rather the front office towards Brandon Aiyuk. They don't like how last offseason was handled. They don't like how he handled it. So it's still it's still in the air, right? But Marcos, I kind of see a scenario playing out where the Niners do end up trading Brandon Aiyuk because it does free up a lot of cap space.
So, okay. And remind me again, how exactly would you feel about that if Ayuk were to go? If you were to be traded after, I'm just curious because again, this is the two sides to like backing a take, right? So I just
Yeah,
want to see where you stand a year later now. And obviously, the worst injury, that has to be
yeah.
taken into account. That's no joke. So I don't blame you. Um, but is your confidence in Ayuk being the Ayuk of old gone?
No.
Okay,
I
okay,
still
okay.
very much trust Ayuk, and I guess I'll go against my take here because I do have a lot of faith in Ayuk to be that guy that he was, 2 seasons ago. I expect him to be that player again. The only thing that I'm thinking about at this point is, anything and everything to set ourselves up for the future. And, I'm looking at teams around the league right now who are retooling and rebuilding and restructuring contracts and whatnot, right? Look at the Philadelphia Eagles over there. Um, they teams are making really good moves right now. And just today, DK Metcalf requested a trade. Tyler Lockett was released.
Mhm.
Devontae Adams was released from the Jets. Like there are options at the wide receiver position, and so while I wouldn't necessarily support and call for a trade of Brandon Aiyuk, I would be interested to see what path the 49ers take if they were to trade Brandon Aiyuk, because at that point, Marcus, you need two wide receivers. And obviously there are wide receivers in the draft that you can get. There are some really good ones who've come out of the draft combine, who put up some really promising numbers. We'll talk about that in a few weeks here, right? But then there's also these veteran options out there that are already set in stone, and their contracts, they might be heavy, but they're not as heavy. And
Right.
it kind of makes you question the team building standpoint and what it means at that point. So that's kind of what's going through my head. I don't necessarily support the trade, but I'm curious.
Totally fair. So, now so I'll go to your kind of original point of it. Like I do think the Niners are experiencing a level of buyer's remorse. There's two sides to always having to do right by your players, and you do the right thing and sign a homegrown guy who's developed and did a really good job. Obviously, the whole offseason talks of it all could have been handled a lot better. But that's the other side of the front office side of things of what happens when you wait until the very end of someone's contract or longer than someone should, when you're not having these talks early, when you're not buying, when you don't believe in your guys early enough, and say that's what the Eagles do. They're just like, oh, you're a good young player, I'm going to sign you 2 years before it's even time, and then now you're an affordable player and we signed you for an extension, but now all of a sudden it's market value by the time it comes to pass. So there's teams, and it's not just that either. It's the ability from the owners. I do think this is it's York, right? Jed York. So like I do think
Mm-hmm.
the Yorks are having a little bit of saying like, we're not in our financial situation is we just don't want to put any more cash to players that we're not 100% confident in anymore. And we don't have the luxury of doing that because we paid extra money for Trent Williams. We paid extra money for CMC. We re-signed Kittle. We did this contract on Deebo. I think it was either last year or 2 years ago where they restructured Deebo. And had they just let him go 2 years ago or last year, they would have saved money, even more money
Mm-hmm.
down the back end for this year. So it's like there's things that they could have handled things a little bit differently, and they would have probably avoided being in this position in the first place. So for
But
them,
that's
yeah,
also the gamble you take when you're gunning for a Super Bowl, and that's what the
right.
Niners have been doing for 5 years. The expectation was that, yes, we're going to sign these guys for this much money, and it's going to suck in a number of years, but it's going to be okay because we're going to have one or two Super Bowls.
But I wonder how much of that is like I wonder how much there is like disconnect between Shanahan and the front office, right? Because like for the whole Brandon Ayuk thing, wasn't the whole story that Shanahan literally ran to the conference room and stopped the Brandon Ayuk trade from happening when
Yeah.
it was about to happen? And so like Kyle Shanahan made this decision that the front office clearly wanted to make a different route, and Shanahan convinced them otherwise. So it just like I do wonder if there's a slight disconnect too with the organization and Kyle Shanahan saying like, "Hey, listen, dude, like we paid all the guys you've asked us to pay, and we're kind of in the spot where we need to turn, we need to get to choose who we pay now and like where we make our investments in. Because if you're as good of a coach as we think you are, and you think you are, you can handle what we give you when we've already given you everything over these past 5 years, and haven't received the results that we needed, unfortunately."
Yeah, I can see that. I don't get the sense that there's a disconnect between at least between Kyle and John. I think they're very much on the same wavelength pretty much all the time. That
Mm-hmm.
situation that you were referring to with Brandon Ayuk, well, they had already thrown X amount of contracts at Brandon Ayuk, and there was a situation that went down where basically the Niners were just waiting on a call back. And they got a call back, and then they just had to give the go ahead on the trade. And something happened. Brandon Ayuk told Kyle something, or something happened, and he ran upstairs because he couldn't get a hold of John Lynch. He ran upstairs to let him know, like, yo, this is what just happened. We're good. Like, don't make the trade. So
Yeah.
I don't think as far as that situation there's a disconnect. But I mean, look, when you have essentially all pros at almost every position, throughout 5 years on your team, these kind of situations happen.
Yeah.
And especially when you're stacking all pros like the Niners did for a number of years here, you're eventually, it's going to catch up. The money is going to catch up. And that was why, a year ago, I came on the podcast and told you, like, this is the year going into, last year, this is the year that the Niners have to get this done. Like, you don't have another opportunity because this money is all about to catch up with you. And then, Brock's due for an extension. Yes, he could put it off another year, but at the same time, like, would he be willing to do that? And would the Niners want to do that? Because then the money gets more expensive. So there's, there's all these situations, right?
The Niners are in a tough spot too, because if we talk about the Purdy thing for a second, you'll discuss the offer because I want you to talk about that for a second. But there is a world too where Brock Purdy gets franchise tagged, and then when you franchise tag a player, it's just an awkward spot to be in. It's a good spot for the organization, obviously, because especially in Brock's situation, you're getting, if you franchise tag him next year, it's like market value for even lower than it's probably going to be like 29 to 35 million dollars. And then the following year is when he would get like a 50 million dollars if you wanted to do it again.
Right.
But but then again, then what does that, then what's the narrative behind that? Are the Niners unwilling to pay Purdy? Were they going to franchise tag him, next year specifically because they want to save money and try one more time? Like, those are going to be the things that, the Cowboys did that with Dak, and it ended up working out for them where they, paid him. It worked out for him in the long run where he got the money, but, it hasn't led to much success. So I just wonder that, like, for the Niners, I think that I feel like they're trying to be careful. They want to take the approach of finding youth, like you said, like going for cheaper options to get better, and hope that they hit on a few of these picks, hope that they can land someone who is valuable for cheap. Some of these receivers who will be like, hey, come play for the Niners for maybe slightly less than you would if you were to go play for the Giants, one of those things. So this is, it's a weird situation to have to hear. The Ayuk thing of it all is like, I do think that if someone's willing to bite and give you guys a good offer, I wouldn't hate that either, right? Like,
Yep.
there's nothing wrong with admitting that you were wrong about a guy. That happens more often than, that happens at least once a season where someone gets overpaid and it's just a mistake. So, Brandon Aiyuk still has all the potential in the world, but it is hard to set the expectations are there for him. He set the expectation for himself. So it's hard to, if they pay Brock and they stay with Aiyuk and it doesn't end up panning out, then what does that mean for everybody in the organization and how they can wiggle out of that too? So it's weird.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's overlooked often, especially in football, is, extensions coming off of down years, team down years, not just individual down years. And, we're talking about extending a quarterback here to, this is the position that you value the most on your team as a football team. You are the most careful with your quarterbacks, and the luck or lack thereof that the Niners have had at the quarterback position for a number of years now, it makes sense that they should be as careful as they are being. With Brock, the reported offer right now that was thrown at Brock was $45 million, 45 a year. And that is, if you ask this person, they're going to say it's a low ball. If you ask another person, they're going to say, yeah, that's on par for Brock Purdy based on the season he just had. But if you look at this quarterback and in his resume, through those, 2.5 years, it's a low ball offer. But It kind of builds off of what you just said. It's like, are you willing, and this is what you got to test as an organization, are you willing to take this, bit of pay cut, Mr. Brock Purdy, so that we can supply these, pieces around you to continue building what we want to be this Super Bowl team. And so I don't think they're in the wrong by throwing a $45 million as the first offer. Right. I mean, shoot, when I'm trying to negotiate with somebody and I want to get whatever item it is as cheap as possible, I'm going to go lower than I expect to pay for it. It's what I'm going to do. I'm going to open up those talks like that. I'm not the Eagles. I'm not going to go, oh, here's Saquon Barkley, take $500 million for 2 years. No, it's, I'm going to open up negotiations as a bottom line. I'm going to say 45 mil, even though you're probably worth 52 or 55, 45 mil. And what's your response? If he takes 45, hell yeah, we're in business. Like, we got some wiggle room. So this, initial offer, you guys can just take it, crumple it up, and throw it away because he's not going to accept 45. The number, if it's accepted and worked out this offseason, is probably going to be between 52 and 55. I think you said yesterday to me that Tua is making 52.
Yeah, 52, 53.
53. So, I think he should get more than what Tua's making, because I think he's a better player than Tua. I think he's a better player than Trevor Lawrence.
What about Jared Goff?
we can debate that later. But going back to my point here, I kind of spiraled there. Going and having to pay a player when your entire team has had a down year is tough, because it's hard to evaluate if this is the right move or not. And when you've got to make the hardest call of paying a quarterback or essentially shifting your entire building process to a new quarterback or a new idea, right? It takes a lot of thinking when it comes to this position. And when you have this down year that you saw at the entire, at the quarterback position, but at every position, at every team level, it makes that evaluation that much more difficult and that much more important. So this is going to be an interesting process to see how it kind of shapes out and how things go. But, I'll kind of run down some quick mentions here before we wrap up the Niners combos. So the Niners have made a 1-year prove-it offer to Dre Greenlaw. He wants more of a long-term with long-term guarantees. So he's likely to test the free agent market. And I anticipate the free agent market will be nice to Dre Greenlaw, and he will get something that looks really nice. And the Niners, probably they won't want to move forward with whatever that looks like, because the linebacker position is extremely important, yes, but you still got, Fred Warner here, and it's an amazing linebacker, and you can put a lot of different linebackers around Fred Warner. I mean, we saw it this year, and the Niners are able to still find some success. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Dre Greenlaw gone. It's expected that we lose Talanoa Hufanga in free agency. Per Adam Schefter on his podcast, he said the Niners, are going to lose talent in free agency. Talanoa Hufanga is going to be gone. I think Dre Greenlaw is going to be gone. Brock Purdy's contract is going to take a while to get done because it's not a simple solution. So all the things that I kind of just highlighted. I also want to say real quick, Shefty has been known to be pretty wrong and off when it comes to Niners off seasons and their likely moves. I don't know if he just doesn't understand how the Niners operate. I don't know if, the Niners listen to him and go, nah, we're good. We don't need to do what you're saying. But
Maybe
the
they
writing
farmed him.
does.
Maybe they farmed him the wrong info.
Could be, right? But, the writing does seem on the wall for a lot of these things that Shefty's talking about, which is why I wanted to highlight those comments that he made, because we're in an interesting and tough cap space situation that we've got to figure out. And so, building on top of that, there have reportedly been a lot of trade inquiries for Jordan Mason. Shocker. I anticipated that.
Mm-hmm.
And if the deal is right, and if there is an offer out there that makes the most sense, absolutely pull that trigger, because I want Jordan Mason to be a running back one. I think he absolutely deserves it. I don't think Kyle Shanahan gave him the love that he deserved this year. And I think that, the return for Jordan Mason could be pretty nice, especially if you're looking at draft picks. As far as the last one I got here is Javon Hargrave. Teams were notified that Hargrave is healthy coming off of his tricep injury. He will be available to sign on March 12th, marking the start of the new league year. So lots of stuff is happening around the Niners. We can go on and have this conversation all day long about how the Eagles are a better run organization than the Niners. They know how to build their trenches better, right?
We'll be doing that in 2 minutes. Don't worry.
Yeah, but the thing with the Niners that we need to pay attention to is what they're doing prior to any further negotiations with Brock Purdy. If you see them continuing to try and shed more and more cap space as this offseason progresses, it means that Brock's market and his, what he's expecting to want in return is going to be higher end of $50 to $60 million. If you see the Niners starting to settle and feel like they're able to, make some more deals around the organization and get some other players in here for X amount, money, it means that they probably feel pretty good about how negotiations are going with Brock. So I'm going to kind of monitor that situation as things go. There's a lot of moving pieces. And the biggest thing that I've been really happy with the Niners so far in this offseason, I promise you I'm wrapping this up. The Niners have been timely in every decision that they have made throughout this offseason. They got all of their coaching hires done prior to the Super Bowl even being played. That was a big key, especially when you're talking about building rosters and deciding who you're keeping, who you're letting go of. That's a big key. If you don't build your coaching staff prior to making these moves, you have so many disconnects and you have guys going, what? I wish I had a say in keeping this player or not. So they made timely decisions there. They've already been working some of these contract negotiations. Like early on, the Niners are making moves. And this is the first of so many to come for this Niners team as they expect to retool and build for the 2025-26 year.
Heck yeah, that's awesome to hear. And that's the thing, that's the story of the NFL. There's always so many moving parts. And with, as many guys as they have on the roster, there's always so many guys that come and go. And, we're about to talk about that here in a second. But the Niners, they have some work to do. But like you said, it seems like they've been pretty forthright and, open, about what their process is and what they're trying to do, because they, people are pressuring them and trying to figure out exactly what's going on and what the game plan is. So, I think they've responded really well this offseason. All right, so let us pivot on to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. So, big news out of the Philadelphia Eagles camp. We're just going to touch on them a little bit. Free agency news. So the Eagles signed Saquon Barkley. I want to start it there. Basically, they signed him to the largest running back contract in NFL history. 2 years, $42 million, I believe it was. So he's making around $21 million a year. It's going to be, the money, we'll figure out exactly, more details are going to come out of exactly how that works. But this is an extension outside of the 3-year deal that they gave him last year, and an extension and a raise in the final 2 years. So this was basically a reward for Saquon, for everything he did last year and getting us to the Super Bowl and him being the focal point of the offense and being healthy and achieving literally every goal that we could have imaginably planned for him. So it was super good news. This is just a way to keep the continuity going. Even if you add new guys, new stars to the mix, keeps the guy motivated. Like, I did my part, and now, let's win again as a team. So this is a great move. I don't know if that was anything that caught your attention early on.
The money initially, when you look at that contract, it's worrisome because you're like, holy cow, you guys just paid a how old running back?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, he's coming off of his career year. I don't think he's going to see another year like it. I don't think next year he can replicate what he's done this year. I would, if he does, I'll buy a Saquon Barkley jersey. Mark that. Mark
Let's
it right
go.
now.
Yes, let's go.
If he surpasses it, if he somehow does, I will definitely get that jersey. But to like you said, to kind of continue building what you're building and to let players know, like, we are bought into what is happening here. This was a great move. And I saw some report, I don't even understand the money portion of it yet. I gotta look into it too. But I saw something that said, like, his money hit this year is going to be less than it otherwise would have been if he didn't, sign a new contract. So Howie's working his magic once again.
Yes, it's Howie season. And so we stay on the topic of another signing, homegrown, or not homegrown, another off-season addition that we decided to extend, and that was Zack Baun. He re-signed for a 3-year, $51 million contract, and so that's about $17 million a year. It's the same that we're paying Bryce Huff, who is, didn't see the field at all, and is just kind of there. So, financially, he is the fourth highest paid off-ball linebacker. So I think that's a perfect place for him to be. I think the only guys making more than him are like Fred Warner, and I'm trying to think who else. I forget exactly who it was. There was 3 other dudes in front of him, obviously. But either way, awesome to keep him. Like, obviously, like,
Yeah.
the difference with Zack Baun is, yes, he's 29 years old. So in most cases, it would be like, okay, yeah, he's still in his prime, but he probably only has like 1 or 2 more like great years left in him. But this is a different scenario. Baun played less than 20% of the snaps in his time in New Orleans. He's still relatively fresh, had a career year, and I don't think it was fluky. I think that he was a perfect fit for the system, and the system will continue for years to come. And to get Zack Baun for 3 years, that's his prime, till his age 31, 32 season. That is like, couldn't ask anything else. And obviously the Eagles chose, and I'm about to get into that here in a second, but they made a decision on which pieces they really wanted to focus on this offseason, because Howie said it, this offseason, we're going to do what we can, but it's not going to be what you expect. And, they're really, from what I'm hearing around, people close to the Eagles who, beat writers around the Eagles, they said that there's not many moves that the Eagles really can make from here right away. And I do think that's something, like, when there's been a lot of, talk that we're in the Myles Garrett market, that'd be super cool if they were able to make something like that happen. But a lot would have to happen in order for that to happen. So that's one of those things where, this season, it's tough to run things back. And when we talk about some of the teams who are, some of the players who are gone, the Eagles released Darius Slay. They released James Bradbury. Both of those were the post-June 1st cuts. Saves us around $6 million in cap space between the two of them. And for Slay, he had recently just come out and said that for the right price, he would want to come back to Philly. And that would be really cool if we could get Slay for another, even for what it was, he was supposed to be declining last year, and he played an exceptional. And even if he was in and out in games, we have the kind of depth to support him.
I'll take him over here.
Totally cool if he does, honestly. There was also talks of him going back to Detroit, which is obviously the team who drafted him, and maybe help them out on the back end there too. But so for Slay, we don't know what's going to happen, but in his 5 years here, he's done everything. He's been one of the best cornerbacks in franchise history, and to win a Super Bowl, get there twice, that's awesome for him. So, I wish him the best. If he comes back, great. I'm not going to complain one way or the other. He's a great mentor to those young guys, and he's a leader on this team. So it's one of those things that, he would be a tough voice to lose in the locker room. But you have him, and then 2 signees, 2 free agent guys that are definitely going to hit free agency. because of the Zack Baun signing is going to be Milton Williams and Josh Sweat. Obviously, both of those gentlemen had a breakout performance in the Super Bowl and had a relatively good seasons. Milton Williams is going to be paid like a top 5 defensive tackle, top 10 defensive tackle because of his age. He's, his spot rack averages, they have him around 17 to 20 million for his range, and Josh Sweat, and spot rack has him at 17. I don't think he's going to make anything above 12. That's just kind of been his market. But the Eagles, I don't think, unless he again resigns on the cheap, because this year he stayed with us and he took a pay cut because he had requested a trade last offseason, and they tested the free agent market, didn't work out. Nobody really wanted him for anything. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of market there is for him in free agency, but the team like the Patriots could probably go for him and Milton if they really wanted to. So those are the guys who are probably going to be leaving who made the biggest impact. Mekhi Becton is also a free agent. Depends on, he might want to come back because of everything, the success that he had with Philly. I do think that there was an element of he actually truly enjoyed playing football for the Eagles, and that it kind of rekindled his love after all the torture he had in the Jets. And, he might be willing to accept a little bit less to play for Philly longer and continue the success that they've been having. So that those are the names to monitor. Obviously, you got other guys like Kenny Gainwell. He's probably gone because you drafted Will Shipley. Like, we could do this whole thing, like Ben said, like for the Niners, there's a lot of names, a lot of moving parts. This team's going to look different, but to have Saquon for the long term throughout the entirety of the prime with Devontae and AJ, like all those guys are signed through the same amount of time together. Another sneaky thing I would look out for that I'm hearing around the Eagles organization is they might do the same little Saquon Barkley deal that they did to Jalen Hurts and extend him. So then that way they can push more money down the line, but then they can give Jalen like a reward, like, hey, you proved all the doubters wrong. We're going to reward you for that, but it'll be a little later down the line. So there's something, that might be a way for them to allocate cap space for this year if they wanted to make other moves. So that's another move to be on the lookout for. So on the Eagles side of things, that's pretty much it. From the news wise, I don't think there's anything that major, which is fortunate. I'm starting to slowly get into the draft stuff, try to pick some guys out that I'm excited to see. But, I'm also in the Myles Garrett race. So I'm hoping that, maybe they make a major move. There's a lot of free agent ends on the market here. We're also in the market for a wide receiver 3. So maybe some of these, maybe the Tyler Lockett's of the world come over. That would be an interesting move.
Jahan Dotson wasn't enough.
Yeah, I know, right? Jahan Dotson's a fine little guy. And it would be interesting to think,
scored a tutty in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, just because, it's funny because Jalen just started throwing to him. Jalen takes a while to build trust with his receivers. So then, to replace him again would be a funny one, I think.
Well, it takes a while for him to throw the football too. So it's okay.
Yeah, it's all right. Doesn't take him that long to win a Super Bowl, I guess. It's fine.
Oh, what's that like?
No, so yeah, outside of that, I think, for the Eagles, that's pretty much it. So, which is nice. Cool. Unfortunately, there's no drama, no more news. There was a random report that the Patriots were trying to reach out to the Eagles about calls for AJ Brown,
Fat chance.
Which is crazy. But they're, for those who weren't paying attention, it's because Mike Vrabel was the coach when AJ was in Tennessee. AJ grew up a Patriots fan, so they were trying to connect the dots there. But and they're like, maybe there's a little truth to the Jalen Hurts in him. Maybe, getting tired of working with each other type of thing. Who knows? So, but that's not happening. He's not going anywhere. So unless you're giving me 2 first-round picks, we're not getting rid of AJ Brown.
So I was going to ask you actually. Hang on. Where are the Patriots picking?
They're fourth.
I'm looking.
I think they're fourth. I could be wrong. No, because it's the. Oh my goodness! It's the Titans, the Browns, the Giants, and then I'm blanking after that. Those are the 3 I've been seeing the most of. I do think it is the Patriots at 4.
I think you're right. I know the
Raiders are 6.
Yeah. Okay. Patriots at 4. So Marcos, if they called you right now, you're the general manager, you're Howie, all right? If they called you right now and said the number 4 pick for AJ Brown straight up, do you say yes?
Oh no. I would need you would need to give me this year's first, next year's first, and then some for AJ Brown. That's what it would take. The Patriots, if you want AJ Brown, you're gonna have to sell the freaking farm to get him. Like, unfortunately, you can have him. Honestly, like, we won the Super Bowl. He might have knee issues that are starting to catch up to him a little bit now. So you might as well take the chance.
Yeah, get ahead of it, right?
Yeah, like, might as
Just
well.
like you guys always do.
There's a few receivers I would take in this draft. No cap.
Same.
So especially
Same.
top 5. So no, I would definitely entertain that, but that's just been a report that's happening. I don't think that'll really happen. But I mean, outside of that, I think we're all good over here. Do you have any final thoughts before we head out here?
Nah, man, I'm all good.
All right, baby. We got to light the beam. We got to
Yes,
feel
sir.
good. Hopefully we end this. We're talking next week before the Warriors game. We're talking about being right there in the thick of it, being battling for 6th. Hopefully we can get a good week of basketball here. But thank you guys for checking in. Thank you guys for watching this episode. This was episode 79 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at Behind the Back Pod 13 at gmail.com for all you audio listeners out there. The links to the descriptions are down below for all you guys watching on YouTube or any visual platform. Please take a look at our socials right up here for us. And then you can give us a like, subscribe, rate, review, follow, comment, all that fun jazz. We're growing with you guys each and every single week. We appreciate all the love and support, and we definitely look forward to it. The changes that are coming your way. It's gonna take a little bit of time, but Ben and I got some fun stuff coming up here.
It's
so
exciting.
we're really excited. So it'll be hype. We get to hang out this weekend. I'm excited for it. But I am Marcos Conan Negron. Beside me here, as always, is
Ben the Jet.
All right, y'all. We love y'all. We will talk to you next week. Peace.
Peace.